Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining our April onX Hunt 101. We'll give it just a couple minutes to let people get logged in and get settled and everything. So while we're waiting, just a couple of housekeeping things. First off, as it says on the screen, your audio and video are turned off. So if you have noise in the background or kids running around or dogs or something, no worries. We can't see or hear you. We do have a member of our customer support team answering some questions in the background. So if you do have a specific question, you'd either like us to answer live or you'd just like an answer on from customer support, you can open the Q&A feature along the bottom of your screen and enter your questions there. There's also a chat box that's available to you. That's the place just to drop in, hey, where you're coming in from. It's, Jack from Montana or Connor from Iowa or wherever. The chat is hard to keep track of. So if you have questions, they're going to get lost in the chat. We won't be able to answer those. Make sure you put them in the Q&A. If you do have any questions that are kind of specific to your account, anything like billing issues, a renewal date, password reset, anything along those lines, those are best sent to our regular customer support email at help@onxmaps.com. We just don't really have the bandwidth to be able to go into individual accounts and answer those questions today. We are doing a giveaway at the end of the class, so stick around for the end of that. We're going to give away some of our new hats we came out with this spring. We're going to give away 10 of those to folks, so we'll post that link in the chat towards the end of the class. And finally, this class is being recorded, so if you miss anything or you want to go back and watch it again, anything like that, we'll send you an email. It'll come out tomorrow evening. You'll get that email with a YouTube link to the recording so that you can go back and watch it as many times as you want. And with that, we'll kind of get into the agenda. Before we get to that, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. My name's Jack. I'll be kind of leading the show here tonight. Been with onX for 5.5, going on 6 years now, and I work on our marketing team and basically handle all of our master classes here.
Yeah, and I'm Connor. I'm on our customer service team. I've been here for about 2 years now. If you ever reach out to us from email or giving us a call, good chance you'll probably get in touch with me eventually.
Awesome. So we're going to cover a lot of ground today. We're not going to be able to go into everything within the app. This is a 101. So the goal for today is if you're a new user or you haven't used onX in a long time, or you're maybe thinking, man, I just know there's more to this and I'm not using it to its fullest potential. Our goal is to get you up to speed so that you could, go out in the woods this weekend and feel comfortable using the app. So we're going to start off by covering the different membership options that are available to you. Then we'll go through the different features of the app, like map layers, offline maps, your different tools, compass mode, base maps, and the search. And then we'll have some time at the end for the Q&A and the giveaway. So while I pull up the map on my side so that you guys can follow along, Connor is going to run us through our different membership options.
Yeah, so with a onX Hunt account, there's kind of 4 different levels that you can be at, 3 of which are going to be paid subscriptions. That one that's not is just the basic user level. So that's totally free. If you don't have any paid membership, you'll have access to the map itself where you can see like satellite imagery and the topo map. From there, you get into those 3 paid levels. We have our premium 2 state, and then our elite plan as well. The premium, that's just a single state plan. It's going to be $35 per year. And that one just gets you access to one state's data. So it's all your private lands, your government lands, any of the hunting related layers for that state, and then access to like offline maps and all your map tools as well. Going up from there, the premium 2 state, it's exactly like what it sounds. It's all the same as that premium 1 state plan, except you're able to turn on 2 states at one time. That one's going to be $50 per year. And then up from there, we'll have that elite subscription, and that's going to be our top plan. That gives you access to all 50 states and Canada, so you can toggle on states on and off as you need. With that, there's going to be some extra benefits, some other imagery options depending on where you're at. Access to all of our elite benefits, and this deals with a lot of our industry partners. So like Vortex, First Light, and then access to a lot of our tools as well. Like our hunt research tools, hunt reminder, and a couple things like that. And that one will be $100 per year.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the app here. I'm going to pull it up I have an iPad here off to the side. I don't think you can see that on the screen, but that's what I'm going to be using. So when I pull up the map, this is what it looks like. Yours might look something similar. And there's a bit of a lag with Zoom here, so apologies for that. If it's a little bit laggy, that's just going from Zoom to, the screen mirroring and everything. So here's the app. When you download it on your phone or tablet and log in, you're going to get an image that looks something like this. This is looking at Missoula, Montana, where we're located, where we're headquartered at. So your results may vary if you're located elsewhere in the country. First thing we're going to talk about are the map layers. So this is kind of our bread and butter. This is why most people get into onX, is to see the land ownership information. The way you turn that off and on is in your layers. Map layers button is located in the lower left-hand corner of the map. So I go down, I see that button that says Hunt Map Layers. It's got a little orange icon there, lower left-hand corner. I'm going to tap on it. The first thing that shows up are my states. Now you see I have a number of states listed here. That's because this is an elite account. Yours might have a bunch of states listed there. It might have one state listed there. It might have no states listed there. Just kind of depends on your membership level and how many states you have turned on if you have either a 2-state or an elite membership. So one of the questions we get from folks is, how do I turn on states? How do I turn those on or add them? If I expand the menu, and all I'm doing here is I'm tapping up top, kind of where it says map layers, and dragging it towards the top of my screen, that's going to expand and show me all of these different layer folders or layer collections is what we call them. So your states are listed first. Then you're going to have some nationwide collections that are available to everybody that has a paid membership. Doesn't matter if you're premium or elite. So those current conditions, land and access, road trails and erect trees, crops, and cover wildlife layers, those are nationwide. Those are available to everybody. And then if I go down below, now you can see the states that I have turned on. So for right now, I'm going to turn off a bunch of these just to simplify things. And then below you see all the other states plus Canada, they're all listed alphabetically. So if I had an elite membership and I wanted to turn on Nevada, the Nevada draw deadline is coming up here in May if you're applying to Nevada. So you can turn on Nevada. And now I see that it is listed at the top with Montana, and it's listed up there. I can see that folder listed there. So that's how you turn states on if you have a multi-state membership. I'm going to turn it off right now just by touching that green button, just to simplify things. So let's dive into Montana. Every state folder is going to look a little bit different. For Montana, we have 8 different layers available. Some states, I think the lowest we have is maybe 3 or 4. Some states, I think we might have like 10 or 12, depending on your state. A lot of that is due to just the kind of data that is available in your state and some of the different state programs. We'll get into that in a bit. The 3 layers that are turned on by default are your private lands, your government lands, and your hunting districts. So it might be called something different in your state. In Montana, they're called hunting districts. Some states, they might be game management areas or deer permit areas, something like that. These can all be turned on and off just by tapping on that little switch on the right-hand side. So that's a common thing we hear is, I've got a paid membership, but I'm not seeing the private lands or I'm not seeing the public lands. More often than not, you've got that layer turned off. So you just have to go into your map layers and turn it on. What does this look like? I'm going to zoom in down here where there's some private and public so that you can see what I'm talking about. Now your private lands are going to have an orange boundary around them. So as I zoom in here, you can see the boundaries between these private parcels. And as I zoom in a little closer, you see names start to show up. If I were to turn off this layer, you can see that's what it looks like now. As I turn it back on, there we go. Similarly with the government lands or public lands, whatever you prefer to call them, those are all going to have a coloration over them, like a colored filter, and that's going to denote what type of land it is. So this blue parcel up here, it might be a little small on your screen, but it says State of Montana. If I go over to the green, that's Forest Service. So again, if I toggle that layer off and on, you can see the difference there. And if you're ever wondering what something on the map is, what does this mean? I want more information. All you have to do is tap on the map, and it's going to pull up a card below that gives you more information about that area. So this, I tapped on that green portion. It tells me it's Lolo National Forest. I can pull this menu up, tells me it's Missoula County, tells me the sunrise sunset zone for Montana, and tells me the hunting unit. I can do the same thing on a private parcel. So I tap there. I see this is owned by David Gehrig. I've got his address there. So that's how, if you want to get in contact with a landowner, we have their tax address listed there. So that's not necessarily the address of the parcel. It's the address where they receive their taxes, where they receive their mail. So if you wanted to send a letter to somebody or something like that. And again, I have the sunrise, sunset, the hunt unit, all of that listed there. A couple of other layers of interest. The hunting districts one is important, especially if you hunt multiple species or if you hunt in a state that has multiple different districts for different species. So let me back up. So I'm at my Montana hunting districts layer. I'm tapping where it says view options right below the name of the layer. And Montana has 17 different district sets. So meaning kind of 17 different species. We break it out by antelope, bighorn sheep, bison, black bear. You see them all listed there. Most often deer is going to be selected for each state. We try to just select whatever the most common species that's hunted in that state is. And in most states in the country, it's deer. But if I wanted to switch to spring turkey, I could do that. If I wanted to switch to black bear, because it's spring black bear season in Montana, I could do that as well. We hear a lot from Wyoming on this. So if you're a person who lives in Wyoming, hunts in Wyoming, I'm hoping to draw an antelope tag in Wyoming this year. You want to make sure you have the correct species selected. We hear about this every year during application period, as well as around hunting openers. And the conversation usually goes something like, man, I'm looking at onX and I'm looking at the Wyoming game and fish regulations, and they're not the same. Your numbers are wrong. What's happening there is they might have deer units selected for Wyoming in onX, and they're looking at the antelope regulations or something like that. So double check, make sure you have the correct species selected there. If you're in a state, there's some states that they just have kind of one all species, it's the same unit, then you don't really have to worry about it. I know I grew up in Minnesota. They've got kind of deer areas, bear areas, turkey areas, and a few different trapping ones, and I think some waterfowl ones, but not nearly as complex as a state like Montana that has 17. So take a look around in there and see what's up with your state. Make sure you have the right ones selected. A couple other ones you can turn on. The possible access, those are private lands that may allow public access. You see this a lot with timber companies or nonprofit groups like land trusts and the Nature Conservancy. So it's privately owned, it's not national forest, but they oftentimes do have an access agreement with like the state where they will allow hunting, fishing, and recreation. So this is a layer that will tell you there may be an option here for you. You may be able to go hunting here. There may be some special rules. You just have to do your own research and, check with the landowner, whether it's like Weyerhaeuser Timber or the Nature Conservancy, or check with your state Fish and Game. They usually have information on that as well. Last one we're going to talk about in the state folders is in Montana, it's the block management layer. Your state is going to be called something else. What this is our state kind of private land public access program. So in Kansas, it's called walk-in hunter access. In North Dakota, it's private lands open to sportsmen or plots. Every state calls it something a little bit different. Montana's is block management. So these are private lands. A lot of times it's farmland that the landowner will work with the state Fish and Game Agency to allow some type of public access. A lot of times it's walk-in only, no motorized use. And then the landowner gets like a stipend or some sort of payment for allowing public hunting on their land. So that's one I recommend turning on. I'll give you a kind of a peek of what it looks like on the map. So here's an example of one. It's got these red dots covering the land with a black border. And again, if I tap on it, it's going to tell me the private landowner name. Then if I scroll down, it'll say Montana Block Management Area. Tell me what type it is. Again, every state's going to look a little bit different. And then if I want to learn more, I can click that area info link. That will send you to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks website, where they will have all of the rules and regulations for this area so that you can know what's going on, know what species are huntable. Sometimes they have closed dates, things like that, so that you can stay legal and, you know, you can treat the land right so that landowners continue to open it up for folks like us. State layers, anything I missed?
Oh, pretty good there. You'll get occasionally other layers in there too. One good thing, if you're not sure what a layer is just turn it on and check it out. You can't break anything in the app. So messing with layers, trying to figure out what's going to be most beneficial for you is the best way or best thing that you can do.
Absolutely. That's really the best advice I can give you. Classes like this are great. The best way to really become proficient with the app is to use it. It's like I use the analogy of if I get a brand new bow, I'm going to want to shoot it between now and September when my elk season opens. I'm not just going to pull it out of the case Labor Day weekend and go, well, this year it doesn't open Labor Day weekend, but early September, I'm not just going to pull that bow out and say, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to want to practice with it. onX is kind of the same way. The more time you spend in it, the more you use it, the more just second nature things become, the more proficient you're going to be come hunting season. So take it out. You know, if you don't have any hunting seasons in the spring, take it out fishing this summer, take it out camping, take it out for a walk around the neighborhood and track yourself and try some of the different features we're going to try today. That way, when it becomes time, you know, when you've got a hunt coming up, you drew a tag, you've got a bull bugling, you're not struggling with your phone and you can focus on the hunt. We're going to go real quickly through some of these other layer folders. Like I said, if we went through every single layer, we would be here all night and probably into the early hours of tomorrow morning. So I just want to hit on some of these folders. Like I said, these other folders, these non-state ones, are available to you whether you have a one state or a multi-state membership. So some ones that I turn on, active wildfires, getting into fire season here. You can keep track of where current fires are burning, what's going on with them. Land and access, wilderness areas I turn on. So that's the federally designated wilderness. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service hunt areas I also turn on. So those are refuges that may or may not allow hunting. You can turn that on. That'll show that information to you on the map. So you can see some refuges are open entirely to hunting. Some have different sections that are open. All that information is shown on the layer there. Roads, trails, and rec. This is a big one for me. I use these as much as I use private and public lands. So the trails should be turned on by default as well as the recreation sites. This motorized roads and trails, that's one I really recommend you turn on, especially if you're in an area where there's some Forest Service land. So in the West, we have a ton of it, but the upper Midwest, some of the Appalachian states, I mean, Alabama, Mississippi, there's a lot of states that have Forest Service land. So what that looks like is it's these purple and white lines. So if I turn this off, you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. So that's the difference there. Those are going to be roads that are more maintained by the Forest Service, and they often have open and closed dates. So if I scroll down, you can see this road is named Black Cat 1, and it doesn't open until May 16th. So if I drove out there this weekend and I wanted to drive along it, I'm going to come to a closed gate. That's going to open in a little less than a month. So double check that if you're going out, especially in a state like Montana. I think more than a lot of other states has a lot of these seasonal closures. usually for wildlife considerations. So they close some when archery season opens, they close some when rifle season opens, and then they close a lot during the winter just to protect animals during a vulnerable time of the year so that there's not four-wheelers and ATVs, and four-wheelers are ATVs, four-wheelers and cars and everything driving up and down the road when they're trying to have calves and raise their babies and things like that. And then finally, the trees, crops, and cover. So the timber cuts is one I have turned on. That's going to be logging that took place on Forest Service land. The historic wildfires is another one that I will turn on. That is showing, so it kind of goes with that active wildfires layer from earlier. When a fire gets put out, eventually that data makes its way to the historic wildfire layer. So here's a fire that burned in 2017 down by the town of Lolo. The Lolo Peak Fire was a pretty big, intense burn, but a lot of people know that deer, elk, bears, game birds, just about everything likes to hang out in old burned areas because it opens up the canopy. You get a lot of those fresh forbs and grasses growing in those burned areas. Also a great place to look for morel mushrooms, and we're right in that season right now. You ever found a morel?
Not out here, I haven't.
Neither have
Back
I.
in Iowa, I did quite a bit.
Never looked for one, so I shouldn't expect to find them, but I need to do that sometime. I heard they're delicious.
One other thing I'd like to mention with the layers, because we often hear about this, some of these layers aren't going to make much of an impact on the map itself. So like your motorized roads and trails, it's just adding those lines for the roads. But there are some of them that like substantially change the look of the map, and some that'll even hide our imagery. And one we often hear about a lot is going to be our forest visitors map or our precipitation radar. I let you turn that on. So it just brings in like old school scanned in 2D maps on top of our imagery. If you have something that doesn't look quite right on your map, or it's not what you were expecting, jumping back into your layers and starting to toggle things off is going to be the best place to start. And you'll often find that it's just one extra layer you might have turned on by accident.
Yeah, I think that's 99 times out of 100 when I've gotten that question of, hey, something's wrong with my map. It's got these weird colors on it. It's a layer. So that should be your first stop. Double check your layers and turn off everything even. You know, you can always turn stuff back on. I usually do it, kind of one at a time and check so that you can learn which layer is causing what coloration, but I don't even know how many layers we have, quite a few.
Several hundred.
So yeah, several hundred if you include all the different state layers and especially sub layers and all that. But there's, like Connor said, forest visitor map, that's a common culprit. The precipitation radar is another one. I think the National Wild Turkey Federation one we hear about a fair bit as well. CWD one.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of them. And there's a lot of layers that are great information that I use, but I don't leave turned on. I'll turn them on for a second, kind of get the information I need, and then turn them back off. Especially when I'm out in the field, I like to be as efficient as I can. I don't want any more information than what I absolutely need. So on my desktop, on my computer, which we'll pull that up in a little bit here, we'll show you how to access onX on a computer. I have a whole different set of layers that I use than what I use on my personal phone when I'm out hunting.
And good thing to mention too there, between your phone and your computer, you can have different layers turned on. So it won't match up between the two. If you want them to, you'll want to make sure you're walking through and turning on all those same layers.
Yep. All right, let's get into offline maps here. So this is maybe one of the second most talked about like questions we get or topics we hear from people is, I don't have cell phone service where I hunt. Does onX still work? Yes, it does. So we have in the lower left-hand corner here, so below that hunt map layers button, there's a button that says offline maps. I'm going to tap on that right now. That's going to pull up this menu. It looks like this. It says offline maps at the top, and there's a button that says new map and says go offline. So what we want to do is we first want to figure out where we're going to go hunting or where we're going to go camping, where we're going to need a map. I'm just going to pick a spot up here. Let's go here. This looks like a good spot. Got my general area selected. I'm going to tap new map. And then that's going to bring up a little bit of a different screen here. So whatever is within this red box is what is going to be saved for offline use. So you see, I can kind of zoom out. The map's only going to get so big. It's generally going to be between 20 and 30 miles wide for this medium size that I have selected right now. It's going to depend a little bit on your device and the dimensions of your device's screen. Like I said, I'm on a pretty good sized laptop here. If your screen is a little more rectangular, the dimensions are going to be different, so on. I can still adjust the map. So right now I'm just using one finger on the screen to pan the map around to get it set where I want. Let's say I'm going to hunt unit 405. I can get basically the whole thing in this one map. Then I'm just going to hit the save button, and that's going to start downloading my map. Let's say I want to save a bigger area. I can just go back in, tap the new map button, and let's say I want to save a bigger area that's all contiguous. I can see this green line in the center of my map there. That's the map I just saved. Now I can save another one that's right next to it. And I can hit save. You see down below, those maps are downloading. That first one's about halfway done right now. You can also save different size maps. So if I pull this up, you can see you can choose your map detail, low, medium, or high. Medium is selected by default, and that is what I recommend for most people most of the time, at least if you're hunting a big area. If you're like, man, I'm not in an area where there's a lot of public land, I belong to a hunt club, or I've got some family land, or I own land myself, I hunt the uncle's farm, I don't need that big of an area, you can go to high detail. You can see that map got quite a bit smaller. So if I know, man, I just want to hunt this area because my farm's located in that small area. This is what I do when I go back to Minnesota where I grew up. We hunt a relatively small area for deer hunting in the fall. All our stands are kind of generally in the same spot. I don't need a very big map. So I save this high detail one. One thing I didn't do on the previous two maps that I do recommend you do is naming your maps. So this by default is going to give you, it'll say map, the date, and then the time you saved it. That doesn't mean a whole lot to me in 3 months, right? I'm not going to remember where that map was that I saved on April 25th. So I will name my maps something that's meaningful to me. It doesn't matter what you name your maps, just as long as you're able to remember it later on. I'll name them after sometimes a hunting unit, a nearby town, a waterway, mountain peak, something like that. So I'm just going to name this for right now, just as an example. So that later on, when I go back and I'm getting ready to hunt and I'm looking through my maps, I realize, yep, I do have one saved there. Great. I do that for, I have some maps that I use every day around Missoula here that I use all the time. And then I have some maps that I might use once a year out in eastern Montana. If I'm going to make a trip to go hunt antelope, hopefully I draw a tag this year, then I know I have those maps for that area where I apply. Couple other things you'll notice in this menu. You see some of these maps look a little bit different. Some have a green check mark next to them. That means that map is downloaded onto your device and is ready to go. If I zoom out a little bit, you see all those maps with a green border around them. Those are currently downloaded onto your device. They'll work for you when you're out in the field. Some of these maps have an arrow next to them, a down arrow. Those are maps that are not downloaded onto the device currently. Couple ways you can get into this state. You could have multiple devices, like I could have a tablet and a phone. And if I save a bunch of maps on my tablet, those don't automatically transfer over to my phone. When I pull up my phone, as long as I'm logged in with the same email and password, that app will recognize, hey, on this account, there's a map saved on a different device, but it's not on this one currently. If I just tap that down arrow, that's going to download that map onto my device for me. You can also tell whether a map is ready to go or not by looking at the border. You see I have a green one here on the left and a red and white, I call it like a candy cane, on the right. That one on the right is one of those with the down arrow. Okay, so that one is not, if I go to that area and I don't have service, I'm not gonna be able to see a map because it's not downloaded. So I know it's this one right here. I'm gonna tap that down arrow. That's gonna start downloading it. The other way you could get into that state is, well, there's two ways. I just had to go get a new phone. My old phone broke, so last weekend I went and bought a new one. None of my maps transferred over because they weren't downloaded to my new phone's, wasn't downloaded to this one's memory or its storage, right? So I had to go through, once I got my new phone all set up and got logged back into everything, I went into my onX and downloaded the maps that I need. Not very common, right? How often do you switch phones? But the other way this could happen is, I mentioned earlier, I'm hoping to draw a pronghorn tag this year. Last time I had a pronghorn tag was, I think, 2021. So it's been a few years. I saved a whole bunch of maps in I had a multi-unit tag where I could hunt a bunch of different units. So I saved a whole bunch of maps and gridded them together like I showed you. But after I was done with that hunt, I don't need those maps anymore because I'm not going back out to that area. You know, I wasn't planning to deer hunt or elk hunt or upland hunt that area. So what I did was I went in and I tapped, I'm going to use this map that says Bob Marshall as an example. So I tapped the three dots on the right-hand side and I hit remove from device. It's going to ask, are you sure? And yes. So that's going to remove that map from your device. If I go to that map, just by tapping on the name, my screen rotates there. I can see that that's no longer there. So you can do this if you're getting low on storage. If you don't need those maps anymore, you can just offload them. I just applied for my antelope tag this year. If I draw, I'm going to go back through and I'm going to tap that down button again, and it's going to re-download them. So it saves me from having to go in and go through all those manual steps earlier, finding the area, lining it up, making sure the border's right. I can just go boom, 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 download all those maps again. One other thing on offline maps, you notice some of these say update available. What that means is some map information in that quadrant has changed. Most commonly, it's going to be landowner names, could be some boundaries, could be hunting units. You know, right now, a lot of states are coming out with their regulations. If there's any changes, we'll get those updated. Roads, trails, new imagery possibly. We're planning to update a bunch of states with new imagery this year. So whenever that changes, you do have to go in and update that offline map to be able to see that new information. Easiest way to update is just by tapping on that green check mark. That's going to update that map. If you have a bunch of maps downloaded like I do here that need to be updated, you can go all the way up to the top of this menu. So go to where it says offline maps, and then go all the way to the right, tap those ellipses, and you can update all maps. And that'll just queue up all of those updates. It'll do one at a time, but as soon as one finishes, the next one automatically goes, and so on and so forth. You don't have to do this all the time. You might notice that it says update available a couple days a week, maybe every day of the week. It's going to depend on how often we have new updated data for that area. If you're not hunting until September, don't worry about updating it until late August or early September. That's fine. Because I work at onX and I'm on my app all the time, I'll update it pretty frequently. My tongue got in front of my eye tooth. I couldn't see what I was saying. So I'll, hit update all maps. I'll go get some coffee. When I get back, a lot of times they're all done. So again, if you're driving out hunting and it says update available, don't think that you can't use the map. It's still going to work. There's just some piece of information there that's not up to date. It might be something important. More often than not, it's probably not. It's probably a landowner name that's changed. And if you have private permission on a piece of land and that landowner sold it, hopefully they let you know, right? They're selling it in the middle of hunting season. Hopefully they're letting you know, like, hey, I sold that field here's the new owner if you want to get permission or something. Anything on that?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add with offline maps, and we hear this quite often, is how you actually access offline maps when you get out into the field. You don't necessarily have to do anything special to do that. When you're on your app and you have cell service, the map's going to be pulling through that cell service or Wi-Fi to load everything. The second that you walk into somewhere or drive into somewhere that you lose cell service and you have no connection, our app will recognize that on its own and flip you over to those offline maps. So as long as you have the area saved that you're looking at, it's just going to continue to load for you and everything will still function basically the same as when you're online.
And one other tip I'll give you is if you're worried about your phone's battery life, the best thing you can do is put your phone into airplane mode. That will automatically flip the app into offline mode. So I just did it manually here. I tapped that button that says go offline. You might be able to see it at the top of the screen. There's a little red offline. When you go into airplane mode, it's going to cut off all cell signal to your device. So you're not going to be able to get phone calls and text messages and things. But that's going to be one of the biggest drains on your battery is if your phone's constantly searching for signal. So you can put it into airplane mode. That's going to significantly increase your battery life if you're in an area where there's limited service or no service. The other thing is to keep your phone warm. A lot of hunting seasons happen when it's cold. Keep it in an interior pocket or something. Cold kills batteries. And then also your screen. Your screen's your other big draw on your power. So if you can kind of use your screen, if you're worried about battery life, put it in airplane mode, use your screen sparingly. That's going to help a lot. And then I always carry like an external power bank or power cube, whatever you want to call it. I have one of those with me, usually one that gets me at least a full phone charge. Some of the newer ones, the bigger ones, can get you 2, 3, 4, 5 charges. Just depends how big a one you want. Don't really have any brand that I've found that's head and shoulders above another. I've got a Mophie, I've got a Revel, I've got a Goal Zero, I've got an Otterbox. I've forgotten a number of them and had to buy them on my way hunting. So I wouldn't recommend that, but they're all pretty good. I think I'm gonna take the plunge and get one of those dark energy ones. I've heard great things about them. So hopefully I can report back on that. All right. So that's offline maps in a nutshell. We're going to move over to our map tools. I'm going to zoom in on my screen here. So this blue dot here on the screen is my location. And let's pretend I wanted to hunt this area and this is my starting point and I want to be able to mark this spot so that I can get back. What I'm going to do along the bottom of my screen in the center, there's a button that says Tools. Looks like there's a kind of a Swiss Army knife icon on there. I'm going to tap that button. That brings up this menu with all your different tools. In the middle at the top, there's a button that says Mark My Location. I'm going to tap that button. And now you see there's a waypoint marked where I am standing at the onX headquarters in Missoula, Montana. I use this feature when I'm out in the field more than any other tool, probably more than all the other ones combined, to be honest. So when I park the truck in the morning, mark my location. If I set a tree stand and I want to be able to find it in the future, mark my location. You get the idea. Anything you want to mark when you're physically standing there. If I want to mark an area that I'm not at, I'm just going to move my map so that it's clear so that we don't get confused in all these different waypoints. I'm going to tap the button. It's on the top to the left of Mark My Location that says Add Waypoint. That's going to put a waypoint just kind of in the center of the screen. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's say that's not where I want that waypoint to be. I can still adjust it. I can still move it. All I'm doing now is tapping on my map. Just a straight tap with my finger, and that's going to move that waypoint around. Let's say I got it where I want it now. Just like offline maps, I highly recommend you name your waypoints. I've got 1,400 waypoints, I think. If they were all waypoint 425, 24, or whatever the date and time is, I would have no idea what that means. So this next spot, sweet. So naming it, that's the first thing. Second thing, change the icon of the waypoint. It's going to default to that X you see there. I'm going to tap this button on the right side that says more, this plus button. We have like 90 different waypoint icons to choose from. So some of them are species specific: cow, elk, coyote, mountain goat, turkey. Some of them are, house, mineral site, point of interest. Figure out what one you need and then select it. I'm just going to pick hog right there. It's a good hog hunting spot right in the middle of Midtown Missoula, right? Choose the icon you want, choose what makes sense for you, and then pick a color. That's how I organize my waypoints. We get a lot of questions from folks, especially after they've used the app for a few years, like, man, I got a ton of waypoints. How do I organize them? How do I make sense of them? One thing I do, there's a couple things I do, but one thing I do is I color code my waypoints based on species. We're blessed in Montana to have a lot of different species we can hunt, and I like to hunt just about all of them. So I will have a color for my deer spots. I'll have a color for my waterfowl spots, a color for my upland bird spots, my turkey spots, right? Whatever one floats your boat, whatever makes sense to you, doesn't matter. Let's say hogs are going to be yellow. I'm just going to save that right now. So you can see that waypoint looks different on my map. Another question we get is, I want to be able to change the location of that waypoint. It's not quite right. Can I do it after it's set? Yep. All you have to do is tap on it. You can see it says Jack's spot. It's got that information. Lower left-hand corner, I'm going to hit edit. And now if I want to change the color, I can. If I want to change the name, the icon, change the location, just like before. I'm tapping around, it retains the original spot. And then it'll show the new one. Hit save. And there it's moved. So you can do that even if you've made a waypoint 5 years ago. You can go back in and change all of that information. Another way that people will organize waypoints by color is, I think a lot of people do it by year. So they will say 2024, they're all yellow, because 2023, they were blue, and 2022, they were black. The only thing you can do that's really wrong is to not have a system. I don't care what your system is, but if you're going to be marking a lot of waypoints, your future self will thank you for putting some of the work in now to put that information on there, to have a system to organize them. I'm so deep into my system now that when I look at a map, I automatically correlate colors with species. So when I'm looking at somebody else's map and I see, a blue on my personal account, blue is for bears. And I see blue, I'm like, really? There's bears there? Like, no, there's not bears there. That's a duck hunting spot. I'm like, oh, it's because their system's different than mine. Doesn't really matter what you use as long as it makes sense to you. You're going to be able to go back and make sense of it later on. Couple other ways quickly that you can mark a waypoint. And when I'm out in the field, if I want to mark a spot where I'm not currently at, if I just press my finger onto the screen for, I think it's 2 seconds, right? For 2 seconds, I'm just going to press on the middle of this building here in the center. That's going to put a waypoint on my map as well. So that's a quick way to do it without having to go into tools and tapping a bunch of buttons. Hold your finger down, and then I can do, I can rename it, I can choose color, I can do all that stuff like we did before. And the final way we'll go over to mark a waypoint is if I query the map. If I just tap on an area, I want to learn more about this map area. Like we talked about earlier, it's City of Missoula. It's a park here in town, right? Where that green dot is that you see just above the menu, if I hit add waypoint, which is along the bottom of my screen right now, add waypoint, it's going to put a waypoint there. And then again, mark it however you want, change the color, all that. So there's a bunch of different ways to mark a waypoint. Most of the time when I'm out in the field, I use mark my location for a spot I'm at. If it's a spot that's farther away, a lot of times I will use that query where I will just tap on the map to put a waypoint there. I don't know why I don't long press. I don't. Personal preference. And with that long press, we hear from folks a lot of times like, man, I didn't mean to mark a waypoint. You don't have to save this. Along the top left corner of my screen, there's a button that says cancel. All you have to do is cancel, and that'll close that out for you. Let's say I want to share a waypoint with somebody. Let's say I want to share this one with Connor. I'm like, hey, let's meet up here this weekend and go hunting. Tap on the waypoint. It's going to pull up that edit menu. Along the bottom, I see that button that says edit in orange. To the right of that, it says share. If I tap share, I have two options for sharing it. Share with a link is the most common, and what you're going to do 95% of the time, most likely. And then there's share nearby. So share with a link, if I hit next, it's going to pull up the different apps that I could share the waypoint with. This is a tablet, so it doesn't have like a SIM card in it. I can't text from it. Most people are going to share their waypoints via text message. I would hit messages, I would select Connor from my contacts, and I would text it to him. He's going to get a link on his phone. It'll say onX Maps. You'll know it when you see it. He taps on that on his phone. It'll open up his onX map and ask if he wants to add that waypoint to his content. He can either say yes or no. If he says yes, it gets added there. When he receives that waypoint, he can look at it, but he can't really do anything else. He can look at it and he can delete it. It's because it's my waypoint. I own it. So he can't change the color of it. He can't send it to somebody else. That's really the big thing. I know when I share a waypoint with somebody, it's only going to them. It's not getting shared to every, Tom, Dick, and Harry out there who now has my hunting spot. I can also go in after the fact and pull that waypoint back. I can pull it off of Connor's phone without him really knowing if, for whatever reason, I wouldn't want him to have that spot. Maybe I am the land manager at a hunt club or our family hunting land, and I'm in charge of setting up all the tree stands. I can get them all set. I can share them all to everybody that hunts with us. Then they all have them. Great. But let's say I'm out there this time of year and I know, hey, these three stands, we got to move. I'll remove those waypoints from everyone else's devices and then send them the new ones when I have the new tree stand set. So you can kind of keep everybody on the same page. It's a great way to use sharing. Another use case for sharing is I hunt alone most of the time. So we want to be safe. I will sometimes text a waypoint to a friend or family member, say, hey, this is where I'm hunting Saturday morning. I plan to be there all day. This is where I'm going to park the truck. If you don't hear from me by, 9 o'clock tonight, something's gone wrong. Try to get a hold of me or, maybe call somebody to go out and look for me or search and rescue or something. So it's a safety feature as well. Sharing waypoints, anything else?
Not pretty good there. The one thing I'd say with waypoints though, on that page where you can edit them, change the icon and the color, there is options for photos and notes on there too. I'm big on both of those just because I like to add as much detail as I can. You really can't lose if you add a lot of information to those waypoints. That way, when you come back to them a year later or longer down the road, you actually remember why you had created them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that should kind of be the theme of markups and those offline maps. Help your future self out. Do the legwork now. I've even done it where I heard a bull elk bugling. I'm going to want to move in on it, but I'm still going to mark a waypoint and put bull bugle September 15th. I sometimes put the date in there too, so I can find it easy. And then change the icon and whatever. It may seem like it takes a lot of time. The more you do it, the faster you get, and you're going to thank yourself later. Couple other tools I want to go over real quickly are the area shape and the line distance. They're very similar. The line distance tool, let me go back here so I can explain what I'm doing. I go into tools, farthest left at the top, it says line distance. I'm going to tap on that. Now I have a crosshair on my map. I hope you can see that on your side. What I can do is I can tap this button that says drop point. So that's going to be the first point on my line. I can move my map over, drop another point. Now I have a line. It's going to tell me how far it is. And once I save it, it's going to show me the elevation. Not too spectacular here in the flatness of the Missoula Valley. But if I go out to a mountainous area, I'll do this again. Line distance. Let's drop a point. Let's go a ways. Let's drop a point. Accidentally dropped too many. So I dropped like a 3.5 mile point there. When I hit save, now I can see the elevation over that line. So that can be helpful if you're in an area with a lot of topography, a lot of change. Do I really want to hike over there? What's that look like? Drop a line, drop a point where I'm standing, drop it to where I want to go to, and I can judge the elevation and see how steep it is. And maybe I do want to walk it. Maybe I want to find a better route. Area shape tool is very similar to line distance. That one is going to be second from the right along the top. It functions very similarly with dropping the points. So I can highlight an area. It's going to give me the acreage. It's going to give me the perimeter as well. And again, with all of these, you can change the color. You can change the style. I'm just going to leave it for now. But we're finding a lot of people, especially like whitetail folks and turkey folks who are managing their land. They use area shapes a lot. So you might draw out the area where you want to do a prescribed burn, or you might want to highlight every area where you want to do some logging or some thinning, or maybe where all your food plots are. I've seen some really cool maps. People have spent a lot of time where they've drawn out every one of their food plots and color coded them so that they know what is planted where. They know, the nice part is they know their acreage, so that they know how much seed to buy, they know how much fertilizer to buy. If they're spraying an herbicide or something, they can just tell, all right, this is 3 acres, that's 12 acres, this is a half an acre, whatever it is. Kind of saves you some of that legwork of trying to figure all that out. Just like waypoints, these can be shared as well. So if you're managing land and you want people, the other folks in your hunt club to know where you're burning or where the food plots are planted, you can share those with them as well. I think we kind of covered tools there pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the tracker. I'm going to get the map back to my location. The tracker is another one of those. I mentioned safety earlier. Tracker is kind of a big safety feature for me, first and foremost. There's a lot of reasons you might want to track yourself. So in the lower right-hand corner, button says tracker, farthest to the right along the bottom. I'm going to tap on that. I have a start button there. I hit start. Now you can see my dot has turned red. That means the tracker is running. If I were moving around, you would see my dot moving and you would see a kind of blue or turquoise breadcrumb trail, a dotted line behind me as I move. I will do this when I'm hunting a new area, especially. I'll mark my location where my truck is parked, then I'll start a tracker. As I'm hunting all day, or maybe just for a few hours, I can see everywhere that I walked. So why might I want to do that? Number one is so that I can find my way back to the truck. I can find the route that I walked in, especially if I'm walking along an easier to walk path. I'm going around a bunch of deadfall, going around a swamp so that I don't walk the wrong way when I'm coming back. Also useful, I use it when I'm blood trailing an animal, so that you can follow exactly where that blood trail is. If you need to backtrack and find it again, heaven forbid, if you need to start grid searching, you can do that, and you can really easily see the ground you covered. And if you've looked, you've looked for a few hours, you can kind of go back and see, all right, are there any gaps? Are there any spots that I might have missed? Same thing with shed antlers. People do that, and they'll cover a hillside in grid patterns as they're maybe looking to match up a set that they found, or something like that. We'll also do this when we are, like if I'm hunting a really heavily wooded area and I want to have the trail into my tree stand so that I can find it in the dark. Growing up, we used to always hang flagging tape, or we'd put some of those like reflective tacks in the trees. We still do that sometimes, but myself, if I have a tree stand where I have the route in marked, a lot of times I won't even have to use my headlamp in the morning, and I will just pull up my onX and I can follow that trail into that tree stand without making a whole bunch of noise and stomping around and scaring everything.
With that too, you can share a saved track. So if you've got a tree stand that you want to send to a buddy, you can send them that waypoint and you can send them the track at the same time. That way they've got that exact line to walk in. They're not dropping through areas that they shouldn't be in that time of day.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different uses for tracking. Sometimes it's just fun to be like, oh man, I hiked 10 miles today. And once you save it, it'll also give you your elevation change. So a lot of places, it's not going to be that much, but you're like, man, I gained 5,000 feet of elevation today, which I've never done, but I've gained a couple thousand, maybe, right? I use it when I'm bird hunting to, I'm walking a pheasant slough to make sure I covered all the areas I wanted to cover. A lot of different uses for a track. It's super handy. Let's talk about some of the different location modes, for lack of a better term. So let's say you're looking at the map and you're like, Jack, I don't know where I am. I don't see that blue dot on my map. In the lower right-hand corner, there's a button that looks kind of like a crosshair, or I've heard it described as a wagon wheel. So lower right hand, I'm tapping that crosshair button. It just flickered a little bit and the map moves back to my location. So that's how you can always quickly orient the map back to where you are. If I tap that same button again, now you can see it has changed. It looks kind of like an arrow, and my map has changed as well. So has my blue dot. I'm going to hold my tablet up. This is what we call compass mode or heads up mode. Whatever direction my tablet is facing is going to be up on the map. So normally north is oriented up like we're used to with most maps. Now, as I turn, the map turns with me. So useful when you're hiking so that you can see exactly what's coming up, especially if you're not hiking due north. You can see what's on your right, what's on your left. If you're the passenger in a car or a side-by-side, you can have that pulled up so that you can easily tell, I've used it while I'm driving down the road or, riding down the road, and we see a bunch of elk on some land. Hey, is that public? And you can pull it up real quick and see like, no, it's not public, or yes, it is. Let's go after them. If I tap the button again, that's how I get back to north being up. So all you have to do is tap that button to kind of switch between those modes. When I'm in this mode, you might have noticed above it, another icon appeared. This one looks like that compass. You see that needle there. If I open that up, this is a relatively new feature. I think we came out with this last fall, right?
Yep.
So this is our compass mode, kind of our new and improved compass mode. Along the top, you see the direction. So I'm facing due south right now. And I get a bit of I can see some of the degrees there, the declination, if I wanted to have that as I move my device. And I also have on the left-hand side of my screen, it might be a little small on your side, but it will give me yardages. I get 3 different yardage markers, and those correspond with some of the hash marks coming from that line that emanates from my location dot. Okay, so you can very quickly tell how far away, I know this kind of street here on the other side of the block is 166 yards away. So if you just want to get a real quick how far away something is, you can do that. If I want to get an exact distance for how far away something is, I'm going to tap that other button that has appeared now in the lower right-hand corner that looks like a handheld rangefinder. If I tap that, we go into rangefinder mode, and now you see that half of that line has turned red, and there's a little circle on the end of it. I'm just going to touch that circle, touch that line, and I'm just dragging my finger up and down now. So I can set that wherever I want. If I want to go farther, I go all the way to the top of the screen. It's going to zoom me out, and I can zoom out for miles and miles and miles, right? And if I want to get closer, I drag it down to the bottom and it zooms me back in. So this is handy for marking a waypoint on a distant spot. So let's say I want to mark a waypoint. Let's put one here on this this building so that you can see it. Let's pretend I'm out in the woods and I'm hunting and I see an elk and I'm able to use my aerial imagery. Let's say it's in the only clearing on a hillside that's otherwise forested. I can find that, I can point my phone towards it, I can run that out. I can tap this waypoint icon kind of to the left. That's going to put a waypoint on that spot. So that's one way I could do it. If I move my map, let me go back. If I just move my map. The other way I could do it is I have my handheld rangefinder. Let's say I range an elk and I say, all right, that's 340 yards in this direction. I can go right here, 340, mark a waypoint, done. Great. So that after I shoot that elk, because let's say 340 is within my effective range, after I shoot that elk, I know exactly where it was standing when I go over there to blood trail. To me, that's the biggest benefit of this feature, is to be able to know where to start blood trailing. I used this last year on a mule deer I shot. It was like 270 yards. It was in some kind of breaky country, eastern Montana, if you've been out there, western Dakotas, that kind of stuff. So I had to kind of go around, climb down, walk along the bottom, and then climb back up to get to where that mule deer was standing. Now, I would have found it eventually, but everything looks different. If you've hunted long enough, be it tree stand hunting or western hunting, you know, where I deer hunt in northern Minnesota, it's really brushy. You climb down, some of those alders and willows are over your head. Things look different. It's hard to find exactly where you're going to go. So even in a situation where the deer might have been 75 yards away, I can still mark that waypoint there. I know where to start blood trailing. It's all about being efficient. It just saves you time and effort. Any other uses for that rangefinder mode I'm forgetting?
That's been pretty much it for me.
Awesome. So there's gonna be more development on this feature as we go throughout the year. I can't really say a whole lot, but we got some cool stuff planned for features for this year.
Oh, and one thing I just thought of, this is going to mostly affect Android users instead of iPhones, but it's often something we hear about as well. The compass inside of Android phones doesn't self-calibrate. So over time, your phone can start to shift and you'll be like, you're pointing a certain direction, but your map's not oriented with it. If that happens, it's a super easy fix. If you're on an Android, it's the only place that it'll happen. On an iPhone, you won't run into this. Just open Google Maps and walk around with that app open for a while. And that's designed to recalibrate that compass. And then that way, when you jump back into onX, it'll be right on where it's supposed to be for you.
Awesome. I didn't even know that. I learned something today.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one, but we hear about it quite a bit.
I'm an iPhone user, so it doesn't help me.
I am too.
I know some Android users. All right, so I am going to stop sharing on my tablet here. We're going to go over to the onX Hunt web map. So give me one moment to pull that up here. Refresh, and then I will share again. So we mentioned before, you can view onX on multiple different devices. So here I'm on my computer. I went to onxmaps.com. In the upper right-hand corner, there's an option to log in. You need to use the same email and password you used on your mobile device to log in. Whatever device you use, you got to use the same email and password. We sometimes hear from folks of, well, I don't use that email on that device. Doesn't matter. You got to use the same one so that it's your same account. So everything that I did on my tablet here is showing on my map. Here's that line that we made. Here's that area shape that we made. They sync up with each other. So anything, if I mark a bunch of waypoints on my web map here on this bigger screen, they will transfer over to my mobile device. I do most of my scouting, my e-scouting on my laptop on the web map. Just because it's a bigger screen, I can really go down and I can see that imagery better if I really wanted to drill down into an area, something like that. So the map itself will look the same. Again, we mentioned earlier, You might have different layers turned on here than you do on your mobile device. The map layers menu up here is, if you follow my cursor, kind of at the top left-hand corner. Same menu, same functionality, same layers. You can turn them off and on there. And your tools are along the upper right-hand corner here. So if you want to mark a waypoint, draw a line, all that good stuff, that's available to you up there. What I want to highlight right now are our different base map and imagery options. So along the bottom right corner of my screen, you see a button here. If I bring my cursor over there again, that says SAT in 2D. If you're following along on a mobile device, it's also in the lower right-hand corner. So it's the same options. You still have that button down there. If I click on that, the first thing I'm going to look at are these three options right here that say satellite, hybrid, and topo. Satellite is probably chosen by default on your end. And if I zoom in, you begin to see that's satellite aerial imagery that we're used to. It is, if you use Google Earth or any other mapping program, an image of the ground. To me, that doesn't tell the whole story, especially out here in the Rocky Mountains. I know that this area isn't flat. So what I will do is I will turn on my topo base map. I'm just tapping on it. All you have to do, tap on it or click on it. Now I can see those topo lines, and it tells me a little bit more of the story. I can see these creek bottoms here, and I can see it going up to this ridge, and it's also going to give me elevation intervals. So here it's 200 feet are these major intervals. It's going to be different depending on what area of the country you are. So each of these lines, it might be different. They might be, I think in Florida, they're like 10-foot intervals because there's not as much elevation change in flatter areas. Some areas of the country, each of these are 20-foot intervals. Some areas they're 40. So it's going to depend a bit where you are. Topo is great for finding different slope aspects. What do I mean by that? When I'm looking for elk in September, people know they like to bed on north-facing slopes because they're colder than the south-facing slopes. I heard somebody say one time, elk are always warm. They're like, it can be in the single digits and a big bull elk is still going to be pretty warm, right? So you can imagine what it's like when it's 80 degrees. Spring bear hunting, I'm looking for those south-facing slopes because those are the ones where the snow melts off first and where the grass starts greening up. The map that I use most often is this hybrid one. So when I turn that on, you get the best of both worlds. I get the satellite imagery, so I can take a look at the vegetation, but I can also get a sense of the slope. So in an area like this, I can tell, hey, it's south-facing, and yeah, there are some open areas. Maybe it is a spot where some bears might be hanging out. I don't know. Might be worth a check. Never been there.
One thing quick to mention too, and this is actually a great spot for it, but if you see those blue stream lines running through the bottom of that valley and then like the dashed intermittent streams running off of it, those only live in the hybrid or topo base layer. If you're in just normal satellite, those won't pop up. So if you are looking for water sources, switching to one of those two is going to make those pop out a little bit more, a lot easier to find.
And what's the difference between the dashed line and the solid lines?
Yeah, so a solid line, and this is as far as like the US geographic.
I think it's USGS.
USGS, yeah. As far as they're concerned, a solid line is a year-round stream or water body.
Mhm.
So it should always have water running through it. A dashed line's an intermittent stream. It might be seasonal or only under heavy rains.
Mhm.
And those are typically going to be dry in your drier times of year. If there's heavy rain or if it's during like spring runoff, those will often have water in them.
Yep. Good tip. Couple other options in our base map button or our base map menu there. You can switch between 2D and 3D. And again, I use 3D way more often on my computer than I do on my phone. It's just a bigger screen. It's a little bit easier to control. So now I've got a 3D map. I can still just with one finger, I'm moving my map around here. I can zoom in, I can get closer, and I can also tip my map. Okay, so what I'm doing, this is on a Mac. Everyone's a little bit different. If you're using a mouse, it's going to be right clicks and left clicks. Play around with it is my best advice, just because there's so much variability in devices and mouses and mice. So play around with it. You'll get the hang of it. It'll become second nature. I have a trackpad on a Mac, so it's going to be different if you're on a PC. But you can, really zoom in. Let's say I want to look at this basin here, kind of, this drainage. I can tip it down. See, I'm struggling now because I'm used to using a mouse. I can kind of get a look of it. I can pan it around. Because there's kind of a saying that I've heard that topo lines lie. Because if you've hunted, especially in a mountainous area, whether it's Appalachia or in the Ozarks or in the Rocky Mountains, you've looked at a map and said, it doesn't look that steep. I think that we can hike that. And then you get out there and you look up at it and you're like, oh man, the 3D gives you a little bit more sense of reality and what it really looks like. Now, even that, I've still done it where it's like, it's not that tall. Because you don't realize, I would be in this landscape, I would be just a tiny little speck down here, right? But it does give you a good sense. And, quite honestly, it took me a little while to get used to reading topo maps. I mentioned I came from Minnesota, you're from Iowa. There's not a lot of topography in a lot of those areas, unless you're in kind of the driftless area or maybe along the North Shore, Lake Superior or something. Where I grew up hunting is pretty flat. We didn't use topographic maps. So it took me a little while living in Montana before I became comfortable with them. The 3D kind of helps shorten that learning curve. Two more things quickly in our base maps. I want to talk about a couple different imagery options we have. I'm actually going to stay in Montana for this first one. We have recent imagery available to you. Now, this is only available to elite members. So you do have to have that elite membership to utilize this feature. But if I go back into my base map button, I click on recent imagery, my map's going to change. So you can see, here's this lake that looks like it might still have ice on it. I'm just going to toggle this off and on so you can get a sense of what we're looking at. Right now, I'm using this all the time when I'm looking at some of my bare spots to see if I can get in there. Is there too much snow to be able to drive in, or am I going to be post-holing for a couple of miles through snow? Hint, I'm not going to do that. Bear season goes till June 15th. I'm just going to wait till it melts. But at least I'm saving the gas of driving maybe an hour and then realizing I have to turn around because there's too much snow. This recent imagery is taken at 2-week intervals, and it is lower resolution than our standard imagery. You can tell, even right here, as I toggle it off and on. Our regular imagery is better resolution. That's the trade-off. This is taken with satellites from space instead of like an airplane that's flying over. You're trading resolution for recency. You can go back in time as well. So I can go back in 2-week intervals. We launched this almost exactly a year ago, I think.
Yeah,
it was March of 2023. So I can go all the way back there if I want. So right now, the example I've used is checking snow levels. If you're a duck hunter and you're hunting late season, you could check to see if there's ice on your favorite duck hole. You could use it to check if crops have been taken out. You could kind of check maybe flood levels even. Of course, in 2 weeks, a lot can change, but it does give you a good sense of at least, hey, what am I looking at? What might it be like? This imagery was taken between April 1st and 15th. It's the 25th today, so we'll be getting some new imagery, should be next week. But I can at least look at it and say, yeah, it hasn't been that warm for that long. Most of that snow is probably still there in my spots I want to go bear hunting. I'm going to give it 10 days or 2 weeks before I try it again. So that's recent imagery. Again, that's only available if you have an elite membership. Another imagery option that's only available to elite folks is our leaf off imagery. We have this in, I think I counted 16 states currently. They're all east of the Rockies. In fact, they're all east of the Mississippi, except for Arkansas and Kansas. So we prioritize areas that have more deciduous trees. In Montana, if we had imagery that was leaf off, it's not going to be all that useful to us. So Wisconsin is one of the states that we have it in. I'm going to turn it on. You can see how my map has changed. So again, if I toggle it off, on. So it's cool that you can kind of see through the trees. In some areas, you can even see like deer trails through there. It's a really easy way to tell the difference between evergreen trees and deciduous trees, to be able to tell, you know, hey, is this a big stand of pines or is this oaks or maples or something like that? So that's what it looks like. If you're in a state that doesn't have leaf off imagery, like if I go over to Minnesota, we don't have leaf off imagery currently. If I try to turn it on, it'll tell me no leaf off imagery available. We are working to add additional states. Not every state has an imagery set available, that leaf off imagery set available. So that kind of limits us. But we are trying to get as many of those, especially eastern states, which has a higher prevalence of deciduous trees. You know, I don't know that we're going to get it in Nevada anytime soon. You know, a lot of the western states, especially that have higher prevalence of coniferous trees. Not that it wouldn't be useful. I certainly would use it as at times in Montana and some of those aspen and cottonwood areas. But we're currently prioritizing areas that have a higher prevalence of deciduous. So again, that's down here in your base map, and you do have to be elite to use that feature.
One thing I want to mention as well, for when you're using these on your mobile device, leaf off imagery, recent imagery, and I believe still 3D are not going to be able to be used offline at this time. Those are just going to be for when you're in either cell service or on Wi-Fi.
Correct.
More designed for like scouting tools and prep before you head out to the field. Might change in the future, but for now, you'll just be able to use our base imagery when you're offline.
Yeah. You can only use these 3 base maps when you're offline: satellite, hybrid, and topo. They're all automatically downloaded when you save an offline map. That's something I should have mentioned earlier. We sometimes hear from folks like, oh man, do I have to download 3 maps to get the 3 different imageries or 3 different base maps? You don't. It'll automatically download all 3. You can switch between them when you're offline, just like normal.
On that too, should have mentioned, all of your layers are downloaded offline. So when you're out in the field, you can toggle layers on and off. If you have something that you want to add, or if there's a little bit too much clutter, no worries on that. It's saving all of those in that offline map.
Awesome. Final topic before we get to the Q&A and the giveaway is the search function. So you can do this on your mobile device as well. In the upper right-hand corner of your map screen on your phone or tablet, there's going to be a button that looks like a magnifying glass. You'll tap on that. That opens up the search on mobile. On web here, it's in this upper left-hand corner. If you have layers turned on, it's going to be right above that. I'm just going to turn it off right now. There's 2 different things you can search for. You can search for a location, or you can search by private landowner name. To search for a location, you can search for a county, a town, a lake, mountain peak, national park. You know, if I want to go to Great Smoky Mountains, which I think is still the most visited. I don't know what it was at one point. Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I don't have Tennessee turned on. I should have picked a state that I had a layer turned on. But as I zoom out, into, at least in the Tennessee portion, there's Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Again, like I said, I could search for Missoula, Montana, Missoula County. There we are. Awesome. So that's searching for location. Most of the time, I think what most people search for is private land. So here's where you're searching for either a landowner name or if it's owned by like an LLC or something like that. When searching for a private landowner, be as specific as you can. As you can imagine, there's a lot of common names in America. So let's say I want to look for a, I don't know, Sam Johnson. Hit search. I'm going to get a lot of different results for a Sam Johnson. Maybe I'll put Samuel Johnson. Now I'm getting a little bit more specific. If you know the middle name, type that in. And the other thing you want to do is be as close on your map, be as close as you can to where that land is. Generally speaking, if I'm searching for a landowner, I at least am going to know what state they're in, hopefully, maybe what region of the state. So you can see Samuel Johnson, I'm getting a lot of Idaho, which in Missoula, we're really close to the border of Idaho. And then I'm getting some Montana, some Oregon results. Nothing for Florida, but I bet you there's a Samuel Johnson in Florida. If I were looking for the Samuel Johnson in Florida, I'd want to move my map over. It's the results are going to be prioritized based on what you're looking at over here on your map. You can also search, you can say, I know they're a big landowner. I don't want to get people that have, a half acre in Missoula in town. I'm going to move this acreage selector up to, 100 acres. I can just type that in. That's the wrong button. There we go. And then I'm only going to get those big parcels. Anything less than 100 acres isn't going to show up in these results. So if you know, oh man, they own a quarter section, great. Bring it up to, 150 acres. Quarter section's 160, right?
I believe so.
I wasn't great at math. And you can filter that way. You can also enter a max if you know how much acreage they own.
One thing to mention back on the location search as well, because it's often used, is if you're searching for coordinates, decimal format is going to be the easiest way to search those.
I totally forgot about coordinates. Thank you for reminding me.
Nice. Yeah, and there's a number of different formats that you can run for coordinates, and even in our app, you can switch those through the settings. Searching in decimal, though, takes out any question of formatting. You just have your positive and your negative number, punch those in, and you'll be able to go right to that spot.
So for an example here, we're going to go 40 is our first coordinate. That's your north and south. Our second coordinate, you don't have to put a comma in, but you do have to have a dash or a negative sign beforehand. If you don't put that negative, you're going to end up on the other side of the world in the other hemisphere. So let's go 110 and hit enter. Select my result right here. That's going to bring me to this area. I've got this icon right here. If I want to mark a waypoint, I'm going to go up to my toolbar on the right. I'm going to hit add waypoint, and it's going to put it right there. So that's a question we get a lot is, hey, can I place waypoints based on coordinates? That's how you do it. While we're here, one other thing with coordinates, if you want to send somebody coordinates, you can copy them from a waypoint. So right there, I could then email that to somebody or text it. Another way to get coordinates, and this works on mobile as well, is I'm just going to move the map. Tap on an area, I can copy coordinates right there and then send it to somebody. So most of the time, again, I'm going to send an actual waypoint to somebody, but sometimes I might just be in an area and let's say it's not an area I'm interested in. I don't want a waypoint there, but I'm driving around and I see some turkeys and my buddy's got a turkey tag. I might just send them the coordinates and say, hey, saw some birds in this field here. Here are the coordinates. Then they can mark their own waypoint and do all that.
I send a lot of just coordinates too if I'm outside cell service and using like a satellite communicator versus having to copy and paste a link in and getting that to send. Hit that quick copy on those coordinates, punch it into that app, and then you can send those out to anybody if you're having them like come in on your spot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like if you have an inReach or a Zoleo or something, you're not really going to be able to send a waypoint, but you can send those coordinates in a text.
Yep.
Awesome stuff. All right. So I'm going to go back to our presentation here. I'm going to have Eli paste the giveaway link in the chat so that we can give away some hats. We're giving away 10 of our new onX benchmark hats. That link there, you can either type it in. It's also in the chat. So you can just copy and paste that or click on the link. We'll ask for your name, email, and address so we can get those mailed out. If you're watching this recording after April 25th, the giveaway has closed, but we do giveaways on just about every class. that we do. So attend a future one and get entered to win some swag, or later, our spring bear class, we're giving away a rifle actually. So be on the lookout for that. And I will email you tomorrow if you won. Please don't email customer support. They don't know who's won or anything. They're handling, customer issues and things like that. So I'll send an email out tomorrow morning sometime. We're mountain time, so you'll get it before noon mountain time, and we'll let the winners know and we'll get them shipped out.
With that too, just real quick,
Yep.
I do email us though if you have any like follow-up questions or need anything. It's help@onxmaps.com. We always respond within 24 business hours. So if you reach out to us tonight, you're gonna get a response from us by the end of the day tomorrow.
Awesome. If you don't currently have an onX Hunt membership, here's your opportunity to save some cash. If you use the promo code APP101, APP101, you'll save 30% off your first year. That does have to be used on our website. So you can either go to this website listed here. This link will take you right to the purchase page, or you can just go to onxmaps.com. When you go through the purchase flow there, it'll ask, there'll be a spot to enter a promo code, enter app101. Does not work on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. They don't take promo codes. They will charge you full price. So make sure you're on our website. If you have any trouble with that, you can email us or call us. Customer support will help you get that promo code applied there for your first year. If you want more ways to learn, our website should be your first stop. Our customer support, our help center there is all kinds of great help articles, different tutorials on that. Our YouTube page is another great option. We have a lot of our old master classes up there. We've been doing these for about 2 years now. So you can go back and watch, some of the old ones. The app has changed. So some of those app specific ones might be a little bit different. But we have all kinds of different ones on how to use onX for scouting for pheasants, scouting for mule deer, turkeys, all kinds of different stuff. So YouTube's a great spot. We mentioned our customer support center. I started in customer support. Obviously, I'm biased working for onX. I think they're second to none. I don't know how many other app companies you can call and talk to somebody who's based probably in Montana, right? And you're going to get an email back. I have companies in the outdoor space that I've emailed months ago that I haven't heard back from yet. I never will, but it's like, why even have a support email if you're not going to get a response? We're going to respond to you quickly and we're going to get you taken care of. Then, of course, upcoming classes. Some ones we have coming up. I mentioned organizing content. We're doing a deep dive on that. That's a new series we started this year where we take a look at one specific feature of the onX Hunt app. Think of it as almost an onX Hunt 201 or 301. It's a little bit above and beyond what we did tonight. So there we're going to talk about how to organize all of your markups, your content, how to use folders, which was something we didn't get into today, but we will in that class. Talk about spring bear hunting. We're doing that one in May. Giving away a pretty sweet rifle and a tripod. And then we also do a monthly onX office hours. We typically do them kind of during the day, try to do them over lunch hour. Realize not everybody can make those, but we will often bring in some of our software engineers or our product managers. And it's kind of an ask me anything. We don't have any agenda. If you have questions about anything within the app, we even go over some scouting tips sometimes. We've had people ask about wild game recipes. Whatever you want to talk about, those office hours are pretty fun way to do that. I'm going to stop sharing. We'll get into some of the questions that we had here. Give me one moment. I'm at the wrong tab. There we go. All right. So is there a way to hide some of our waypoints without deleting them? They seem to clutter up an area. Yes, there is. Let me pull up I'm just going to do it on my tablet so that I can keep the questions up on my computer. A couple seconds while that pulls up. So if you want to hide a waypoint without deleting it, there's a couple ways to do it. And this works for any markup, track, waypoint, line, etc. Here's this hog waypoint I marked earlier. I just tapped on it. It's going to bring up this menu. It says Jack Spot. Right below that, it says Hide on Map. When I tap that, you can see that waypoint disappeared. If I do it again, right, I can bring it back and I can hide it. Now my tablet is freezing up on me a little bit because I tapped it too quickly. But it's hidden. I can bring it back. So that's one way to do it. The other way, or I guess there's a couple of ways, I can go into my content. It's along the bottom of my screen here. I can tap on my waypoints. I can tap on those ellipses. And here, that's the one I just hid. I can hit show on map. I can tap on it. I can hit hide on map when it's hidden. So this is the one that's kind of in the middle of the screen there. It's got the eyeball crossed out there. That's how I know it's hidden. So be aware when you hide a waypoint. Remember that. So if you hide something and then it's 6 months from now and you're looking for it and you're like, oh my God, all my waypoints are gone. Double check you don't have any hidden. And, save yourself some of the mental anguish of having to email us and being like, oh, my waypoints are gone. And then we look at it and we help you through it. And we're like, no, they're just hidden. We just got to bring them back. The other way to do this, what I typically do, and we didn't talk about folders today. It is a little bit beyond a 101, but you can put content into folders. So I'm just going to make a folder real quick. Here's a folder. I'm going to add some content to it. So I'm going through this real fast. I know this is just a quick demonstration. So if I group my waypoints into folders, which is what I personally do, again, I do it typically either by species or by hunting trip. So last year I did a sage grouse hunting trip in kind of central eastern Montana. I grouped all my waypoints for that into a folder so I could turn them on and off. Didn't get any sage grouse, unfortunately. But I'll do that with elk, deer, etc. So I have this folder. I can also just hit hide folder on map. So I can hide multiple waypoints at a time. That's one of the reasons why I group my waypoints and my folders by species is because they're very seasonal. So right now I'm bear hunting. We got a spring season in Montana. I don't have my elk waypoints turned on because I don't need them till September. I've got bear turned on. I've got some of my fishing ones turned on, and I've got some just like miscellaneous. Upland, pronghorn, waterfowl, elk, they're all turned off. Come September, I'll turn them back on. So that's how you can do that. Next question, how do I delete waypoints or tracks? That's a easy task to do. Tap on a waypoint. So I have that one that I marked at our last 101. Along the bottom of my screen, I can tap edit and hit that delete button. It's going to ask me, make sure, and it's gone. Make sure you're actually wanting to delete it. If you do accidentally delete something, we can restore it for you. You do have to contact customer support and say, hey, I accidentally deleted a whole bunch of waypoints. I'd like them back. We can go in and restore them for you. It's not a super difficult process, but again, if you were needing them right away, it might take us till the next business day to get back to you on those. So make sure you're actually wanting to delete it before you do. Last question here. Is there an option to download a whole unit instead of a bunch of squares? At this time, there's not. We're limited. We're only able to save those squares on the map. What I do, if I need to save, if I've got a big unit and I want to save the whole thing, like I did earlier, I'm gonna go to medium. Oh, I guess this one does fit in there. Let's find a really large one. Here we go. So let's say I want to save 702 here is pretty big. I'll just hit save, new map, save, and do that to save the whole unit. I think at some point we will get to that where we'll be able to save a unit. You can imagine why it's difficult with when you start thinking about like the geometries of those. It's easier to save right angles and squares than it is to save those really irregular ones. Something I think we'll be able to do in the future. I don't know when. For right now, we're limited to those squares or those rectangles. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing, and we'll throw that giveaway link in the chat one more time. And if anybody has any questions, let us know, help@onxmaps.com. Attend a future masterclass. Let us know what you think. There'll be a survey at the end of this one where you can rate it and give us suggestions for improvement. We read all those so we can make these better. And with that, we'll say goodnight.